That night, Robin Williams came to make people laugh. But one fan's story silenced him in a way nothing else ever could. The Laugh Factory in West Hollywood was packed. Over 300 people crammed into the dimly lit room, shoulder to shoulder, drinks in hand, ready for an evening they'd never forget. The air hummed with anticipation. Robin Williams wasn't just performing that night, he was healing. After months away from the stage, battling demons only he understood, he'd returned to the place where he felt most alive, standing under a spotlight, making strangers laugh until their faces hurt. The intro music faded. The host's voice boomed through the speakers. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the stage Robin Williams!" The crowd erupted. People leapt to their feet. Some were crying before he even said a word. He shuffled onto the stage with that familiar hunched posture, waving sheepishly, his eyes twinkling with mischief and gratitude. He grabbed the microphone, let the applause wash over him, and then with perfect timing raised one finger. Okay, sit down. You're making me look good, and we both know that's impossible." Laughter exploded. He was off. For the next 40 minutes, Robin became a tornado of voices, characters, and impressions. He was a Russian opera singer, then a British aristocrat, then a confused tourist asking for directions in broken Spanish. The audience couldn't breathe. Every punchline landed like fireworks. This was Robin at his best, raw, unfiltered, electric. But then something shifted. He stopped mid-sentence. The laughter died. The room went silent. Robin's eyes had locked onto someone in the front row. A young man, mid-20s, sitting perfectly still while everyone around him roared with laughter. The guy wasn't smiling. He wasn't frowning either. He was just watching. Intently. And on his forearm, clearly visible under the stage lights, was a tattoo. Robin squinted, leaned forward slightly, and his entire body language changed. The performer vanished. What remained was just a man, standing on a stage, staring at an image on someone's skin. If you want to know what Robin saw in that tattoo, and why it broke him in front of 300 people, subscribe now, because the most powerful moment of his life is still ahead. The tattoo wasn't elaborate. No bright colors, no intricate designs. Just black ink. Simple. A bird in flight. But beneath it, in small, careful letters, "You gave me permission to feel." Robin read those words from the stage. His lips moved silently as he processed them. The audience sensed something had changed. A few people glanced at each other, confused. Was this part of the act? Robin stepped back from the mic. He rubbed his face with both hands. When he looked up again, his eyes were different, softer, older, sadder. He walked to the edge of the stage and crouched down, getting closer to the young man. "Can I ask you something?" His voice was quiet now, stripped of all performance. The young man nodded, clearly nervous but holding Robin's gaze. "That tattoo," Robin said, pointing gently. "What does it mean?" The room was so quiet you could hear the ice melting in people's drinks. The young man swallowed hard. You could see him debating whether to speak, whether to share something so personal in front of strangers. But Robin's face held no judgment, only an open, aching curiosity. So the young man spoke. "When I was 15, he began, his voice shaking slightly, "I saw Dead Poets Society for the first time. I was in a really dark place. My dad had just died. I didn't know how to cope. I didn't know if I wanted to keep going." He paused. Robin didn't move. "But then I heard you say, seize the day. Make your lives extraordinary. And for the first time in months, I felt something. I felt like maybe it was okay to still be here." The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was sacred. Robin stayed crouched at the edge of the stage, his hand over his heart, nodding slowly. Some people in the audience were crying now, not from laughter but from something deeper, something they didn't expect to feel in a comedy club on a Thursday night. Robin stood up slowly. He walked back to the microphone, but he didn't pick it up. He just stood there, looking out at the room full of faces. "I didn't write those words," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "But I'm so glad they found you." He turned back to the young man. "Thank you? Thank you for being here. Thank you for choosing to stay." But this was only the surface. What no one in that room knew was that this moment had been building for years and it was about to crack Robin wide open. The show didn't continue the way anyone expected. Robin didn't launch back into jokes. He didn't try to lighten the mood with a quick impression or a silly voice. Instead, he did something he'd never done in a public performance before. He sat down. Right there on the stage floor, cross-legged, like a kid at story time. The audience watched, mesmerized. "Can I tell you something?" Robin asked, looking around the room. "I've spent my whole life trying to make people laugh. And somewhere along the way, I convinced myself that was enough. That if I could just keep people from feeling pain for an hour, maybe two, then I was doing something good. But the truth is..." He trailed off, searching for the words. "The truth is, I've been running from my own pain for so long, I forgot what it felt like to just sit with it. To let it exist." People shifted in their seats. This wasn't the Robin Williams they came to see. This was something else. Something raw and unfiltered and terrifyingly honest. "I've played characters who taught people to seize the day, to believe in themselves, to feel deeply. But me? The real me? I've spent most of my life hiding. Behind jokes, behind voices, behind anything that would keep people from seeing how scared I am." A woman in the third row wiped her eyes. A man in the back stood perfectly still, afraid to break the moment. Robin looked down at his hands. "When I saw your tattoo," he said to the young man in the front row, "I didn't just see words. I saw evidence. Evidence that something I did mattered. And that terrifies me, you know? Because if it mattered, then I have a responsibility. A responsibility to be honest. To be real. And I haven't been real in a very long time." He paused. Took a breath. And then he told a story no one expected. "When I was 12 years old," Robin began, his voice steady now, "my mother gave me a bird. A small blue parakeet. I named him Charlie. I loved that bird. I'd talk to him for hours. He was the only thing that didn't expect me to be funny, to perform, to earn my place in the room. He just existed. And that was enough." He smiled faintly at the memory. "One day, I left the cage door open by accident. Charlie flew out. I panicked. I ran through the house, trying to catch him, but he flew straight through an open window. I watched him disappear into the sky. I was devastated. I thought I'd lost him forever." Robin's eyes grew distant, as if he were watching that moment play out in front of him. "But here's the thing I realized later, much later, Charlie didn't fly away because he wanted to escape. He flew away because that's what birds do. They need to fly. They need to feel the wind, to test their wings, to see how high they can go. And I had been keeping him in a cage, thinking that was love. Thinking that if I could just keep him safe, close, controlled, then nothing bad would happen to him." He looked directly at the young man with the tattoo. "You put a bird on your skin. A bird in flight. And underneath it, you wrote that I gave you permission to feel. But the truth is, you gave yourself that permission. You opened the cage. You stepped out into the wind, even though it was terrifying. Even though you didn't know if you'd fall or fly. And you're still here. You're still flying." The room was completely still. No one coughed. No one moved. They were witnessing something beyond performance, a man confronting his own fragility in front of strangers and finding strength in it. Robin stood up slowly, his knees cracking slightly, a reminder that he was aging, that time was moving whether he was ready or not. He picked up the microphone, but he didn't perform. He just spoke. "I've spent so much of my life being Charlie in the cage. Afraid to feel too much, to hurt too much, to be too much. But you," he pointed to the young man, "you reminded me tonight that feeling isn't weakness. It's the whole point." And then, in a moment that would ripple through that room for years to come, Robin Williams did something extraordinary. He invited the young man onto the stage. The guy hesitated, clearly overwhelmed, but the audience erupted in encouragement. He stood, climbed the steps, and walked toward Robin. They stood face to face, and Robin extended his hand. But instead of shaking it, the young man pulled Robin into a hug. A real, full, unguarded embrace. Robin held him tightly, and for just a moment, his shoulders shook. Not from laughter. From something deeper. When they finally pulled apart, Robin looked at him with wet eyes and said, "Thank you for reminding me why I do this." The young man nodded, unable to speak, and returned to his seat. The audience exploded into applause, but it wasn't the applause of entertainment. It was the applause of gratitude, of shared humanity, of witnessing something they would carry with them forever. Robin picked up the mic one last time. "I came here tonight to make you laugh," he said, his voice stronger now. "And I hope I did. But more than that, I hope you leave here tonight knowing that it's okay to feel. It's okay to hurt. It's okay to be broken. Because that's where the light gets in." He set the microphone down gently on the stool, waved one last time, and walked off stage. The crowd stood as one, clapping, crying, and cheering. But Robin didn't come back for an encore. He stood backstage, leaning against the brick wall, staring at nothing and everything, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of what had just happened. Later that night, after the crowd had dispersed and the club had emptied, Robin sat alone in the dressing room. The young man with the tattoo knocked softly on the door. Robin looked up, smiled, and gestured for him to come in. They didn't say much. They didn't need to. The young man handed Robin a small folded piece of paper. "I wrote this for you," he said. "In case you ever need reminding." Robin unfolded it. Inside, in careful handwriting, were the words, "You are not the cage. You are the wings." Robin read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully, tucked it into his wallet, and kept it there for the rest of his life. The bartender, who had been wiping down glasses in the corner, approached quietly. "Mr. Williams," he said hesitantly, "I've worked here for 12 years. I've seen hundreds of shows. But tonight was different." Robin looked up at him, exhausted but present. "How so?" he asked. The bartender set down his towel. "Because you stopped pretending. And when you stopped pretending, we all stopped pretending too. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I wasn't alone in this." Robin nodded slowly, understanding the weight of what had been shared in that room. It wasn't just his moment. It was everyone's. The young man with the tattoo wasn't the only person carrying pain. He was just the one brave enough to make it visible. And in doing so, he'd given everyone else permission to acknowledge their own. The 3 of them sat in silence for a while, each processing the evening in their own way. Finally, Robin stood, gathered his things, and paused at the door. "You know what the crazy thing is?" he said, looking back at them. "I came here tonight thinking I needed to fix myself before I could be real with people. But maybe being real is what fixes us." He smiled that sad, knowing smile and walked out into the cool Los Angeles night. Weeks later, Robin received a letter. It was from the young man's mother. She wrote about how her son had come home that night different, somehow lighter, more hopeful. She wrote about how he'd been struggling for years, how she'd been terrified she would lose him, and how that one moment on stage had given him something to hold on to. "You'll never know how many lives you've touched," she wrote. "But I wanted you to know about this one. Thank you for seeing my son. Thank you for letting him see you." Robin kept that letter in the same wallet, right next to the note that said, "You are not the cage. You are the wings." And every time he felt himself retreating, every time the darkness crept in and whispered that he wasn't enough, he would pull out those 2 pieces of paper and remember, vulnerability isn't weakness. It's the bridge that connects us all. Share this story and subscribe so his legacy will never be forgotten. Because the world needs to remember that Robin Williams wasn't just a comedian. He was a man who taught us all to feel, even when it hurt, even when it was terrifying, and that was his greatest gift. This video is a fictional dramatization inspired by real public appearances of Robin Williams.